We have concluded our journey of 13 weeks exploring characteristics of the church when the church gets it right. This week we're shifting to another journey, and that is the common experience that every citizen has had on the planet Earth, and that is the pandemic. The birth of the pandemic occurred in 2019, 100 years following the pandemic of 1919. I've read, heard, and been involved in thinking and discussing with others and many of you concerning the impact that the pandemic has had on our life together. These discussions and reflections have been through the lens of our social systems, our political system, our economic system, and our personal lives. I've been yearning for someone that's a lot smarter than myself to consider the pandemic, COVID, through the lens of faith. My waiting has been to no avail. So I've decided that such a journey would be a good one to take with those of us who have joined together in a weekly digging deeper into a variety of subjects in the adult education program of Grace United Methodist Church in Winfield, Kansas. Now, it's interesting to note that the existence of this video program came as a direct result of the pandemic. Our history began with our pastor coming to me with the message that the church must not only continue to worship through Zoom, but also we needed adult education to continue through Zoom. She had the idea and asked if I would join the effort by preparing a weekly video which would be discussed with others on Zoom, along with our experience of worshiping on Zoom. Remotely, I said, why not? And all because of COVID. 160 weeks later, we're still on the journey of digging deeper together. Now, on this journey of exploring the impact of COVID through the lens of faith, I'm basing my thought on not only on what COVID might have caused, but on what the pandemic intensified, or how the pandemic surfaced to our awareness what maybe already existed, but all through the lens of faith. This week we begin our journey with how the pandemic has intensified the depersonalization of everyday living. Now, to be sure, before COVID hit, this trend of depersonalization in everyday life was happening. For example, when a survey was taken and the person taking the survey had to complete the sentence, "My most cherished companion is," and the answer of a significant number of the respondents was, "My phone," especially among children and youth. Their most cherished companion was their phone, rather than another human being. The sense of companionship with technology was intensified as we coped with the pandemic. How did COVID spread? Through personal contact, and therefore it became transoceanic because of personal contact or on international flights. Keep your distance. Touch fists rather than shake hands. hug only if masked. These admonitions became the new language since COVID came on our scene. Now, all of us have responded in our own way to this new reality, but through the lens of faith, it's had a traumatic impact. This depersonalization, this companionship with technology. The reason that it's had such a dramatic impact in terms of faith is that faith is a deeply interpersonal journey. The Christian library, the New Testament, is clear in the understanding of the interpersonal nature of faith. Jesus lived a life of discovering the God of love in the lives of others and witnessed that the God of agape love was within him to share with others. The Gospel of John presents the incarnation. The God of love in flesh was not a once and for all experience in Jesus. It was once in Jesus and forever in the lives of Jesus' disciples. You see, it's had a dramatic impact, COVID has, on intensifying depersonalization, and therefore its impact on faith journey has been severe, if you will, because faith is a personal experience to be experienced in community with others, in personal relationships with others. And along came COVID, undermining the very foundation of faith as a personal, interpersonal journey of faith. How is faith discovered without personal relationships? The experience of COVID intensifying depersonalization of everyday life has chipped away at the very foundation of following Jesus, whose experience and teachings concerning faith was all about personal relationships with others. Recently, I visited with a staff member of a mega church. Thousands participated every week personally in the life of that faith community before COVID. But she said, Bruce, we're back to maybe 65% of where we were before COVID in terms of persons participating in our life. I don't know if the other 35% will ever be back, she said. They are satisfied or feel compelled by COVID to live their faith without personal relationships. Bruce, you know, depersonalization and faith are at odds with each other. For the life of faith is life together. End of quote. You know, whether you agree or disagree with what this person said, the evidence is startling in faith communities in the United States. For few congregations of any faith persuasion exist today without that 25 to 35% at least decrease in personal involvement in the community of faith as a consequence, as a result of COVID. You know, the faith we sing goes like this: I am the church. You are the church. We are the church together. All who follow Jesus all around the church, all around the world, yes, we are the church together. The church is not a building. The church is not a steeple. The church is not a resting place. The church is people. That is the faith we sing, and depersonalization has made that more and more difficult to achieve in the human community. You see, the challenge for faith communities was significant before COVID to deal with depersonalization. But since COVID, the challenge is much greater. For the pandemic seems to be a wall that cannot be climbed rather than a simple hurdle that must be jumped. The faith community must be aware that to affirm the development of individuals in the faith community is dependent on interpersonal relationships. And we must say that loud and clear and do everything in our creative power to be sure that the trend of depersonalization, when the best companion one has in life is not the phone, but rather each other. I think that's a lot to think about as a consequence of COVID. And my questions through the lens of faith to the intensification of the trend of depersonalization of daily living are: one, is a telephone call that the connection of human voices more personal and therefore more faith-bearing than a text or an email. Secondly, is wearing a mask in order to hug more personal and therefore more faith-bearing than being unmasked and touching fists. And thirdly, what new ways have you discovered since the arrival of COVID to counter the trend of depersonalization and deepen personal relationships of agape love with others? Thank you for joining the journey.